The dining room was dressed like a magazine spread. White linen tablecloth, polished cutlery, flickering candlelight, and 10 perfectly arranged place settings. Yet the air felt wrong, like the scent of perfume sprayed over something rotting. At the center of it all sat a porcelain cup. No steam rose from it, just silence, stillness. My fingers curled around the handle, but it was her eyes I noticed. Too still, too precise, too practiced. She smiled that overly soft kind of smile people give when they want to appear gentle. Her voice matched it perfectly. "It's made specially for you, Daniel." Across the table, her mother complained about airline tickets. Her father chuckled into his second glass of wine. My wife, Maya, laughed at something that wasn't even remotely funny. And just like that, a thought pierced through me like a whisper with teeth. What if the woman who kisses you goodnight is the same woman quietly planning your collapse? I lifted the porcelain cup to my lips, just to smell it, out of habit more than caution. But the moment the scent touched my nose, my gut tightened. Something was off. Beneath the sugary sweetness, there was something bitter, metallic, like blood, or pennies rubbed between fingertips. Not strong enough to make a scene, but enough to make my instincts scream in whispers. I didn't panic. I didn't flinch. I simply lowered the cup and scanned the room once more. Maya was smiling, still watching me. Too closely. I gave her the smallest nod. She looked away. In that moment, I made a decision. I reached forward, casual calm, and swapped my cup with the one sitting beside her mother, Annika. No one noticed. Not even Maya. Her mother was too busy scrolling through her phone and complaining about hotel check-ins to care. The exchange took less than 3 seconds. 3 seconds that would change everything. I leaned back in my chair, folded my hands on the table, and waited. Not for validation, not for praise, but for the truth to reveal itself. It happened almost exactly an hour later. We were halfway through dessert, some kind of almond cake Maya had made herself. Annika, her mother, reached for her cup again. She took a long sip. Seconds later, her throat made a sound I can still hear in my head, like metal grinding against glass. She started coughing, once, twice, then harder. Her hand clutched her chest. Her face flushed deep red, then blue. Panic broke like glass across the table. Maya jumped up, knocking over a wine glass. Her father stood, shouting her name. Neha froze her spoon midair. I didn't move. I didn't blink. I watched it all from the same seat, quiet as the porcelain cup that still sat in front of me untouched. Voices rose, chairs scraped, someone dialed emergency services. Maya dropped to her knees beside her mother, hands trembling. I looked at her and said nothing. Because this chaos, this unraveling, it didn't start tonight. Voiceover, but this chaos didn't begin here. It began 3 days ago. It was just after dinner on a quiet Wednesday night. The lights were dim, soft music played from her favorite playlist, and Maya had just poured me a glass of wine. We were sitting on opposite sides of the couch, close in distance, but that evening something felt different. Her legs were curled underneath her, her body angled toward me like she had rehearsed it. She smiled faintly, swirled the wine in her glass, and said it almost like a casual afterthought. I was thinking, what if we helped Neha with her new business idea? She just needs $150,000 to get it off the ground. No pause, no hesitation. Just a suggestion delivered with the softness of a lullaby, but it didn't land that way. It didn't feel like a question. It felt like a pre-approved deal I was expected to co-sign. Not, what do you think? Not, can we afford it? Not, do you feel comfortable? Just, she needs $150,000. I stared at her for a moment, trying to read the corners of her face. But Maya was always good at staying unreadable when it mattered most. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I let the silence stretch just a little too long enough to feel the weight behind her words, to let her sit with it. Maya kept swirling her wine, but her eyes flicked toward me once, twice, waiting. The question hung in the air like perfume that had been sprayed too close. Sweet, but suffocating. And suddenly, I felt it. The way she asked wasn't gentle. It was strategic. The softness was too smooth, too calculated, like someone laying velvet over a loaded gun. It wasn't a request. It was an expectation, one dressed in affection, one that counted on my predictability. That's what made me pause. Not the money, not Neha, but the way Maya was so sure I'd say yes. So I didn't. I looked her in the eye, calm and steady, and said, "I don't think that's something we can commit to right now." Her lips didn't twitch, her eyes didn't blink, but something behind them, something subtle, shifted. She nodded. "Okay," she said, but everything inside me knew it wasn't okay at all. She said, "Okay," but something in her eyes wasn't okay at all. It wasn't anger, it wasn't disappointment, it was calculation. The kind of stillness that doesn't belong to a person who's at peace, but to someone who's recalculating the route after a detour. Her smile didn't fade, but it felt like it no longer reached her eyes, as if it had a boundary now, an invisible wall that had been quietly erected between us. And I knew in that moment that I hadn't just said no to a request. I had disrupted something much larger, a plan, a script, a role I was never supposed to question. That night, long after dinner was over and the house had gone still, I passed by our bedroom door. It was cracked open just slightly. Maya was sitting on the edge of the bed, phone pressed to her ear. Her voice was low but sharp. "He said no. Yeah, I know." No surprise, no frustration, just confirmation. As if someone on the other end already expected this outcome. As if I had just failed to play my part correctly. She thought I was asleep. I wasn't. I stood there, heart quiet, eyes open, and something inside me shifted too. Not out of fear, not out of hurt, but out of instinct. From that moment on, I stopped trusting what was said, and I started watching what was done. Once you stop trusting someone's words, you start noticing the small things, the things you would have ignored before or explained away with love. Her phone used to be unlocked, face up out in the open. Now it was always screen down, and the moment I walked into the room, she'd lock it quick, almost instinctively. A nervous smile would follow, like she knew I noticed and didn't care. Then there were the passwords, all changed, overnight. Her laptop, once something she'd ask me to help fix or update, suddenly became sacred ground. If I so much as glanced at the screen, she'd close it gently but purposefully. And Neha started showing up more. Always with a new reason, a new errand, a quick visit that turned into a long stay. She laughed too loudly, made too much eye contact, and touched my shoulder in ways that didn't feel like affection, more like testing. I started seeing not what they did, but how they did it. There's a kind of confidence people have when they think they're getting away with something, that smug ease, that sloppiness that only appears when they think you're not watching. But I was. And every smile they faked, every whisper they thought I couldn't hear, only made me quieter and more dangerous. It happened on a Tuesday afternoon. Neha was over again, pretending it was just another casual visit, something about returning a book Maya lent her. She lingered in the kitchen while Maya stepped out to take a call, her laugh echoing in the room like it didn't belong. I stood by the sink rinsing out a glass when I felt her hand lightly brushing against my shoulder as she passed behind me. A touch that lasted just a second too long. A touch that said, "We know, and we don't care if you suspect." It wasn't flirtation, it was a dare. That moment didn't fill me with jealousy. It didn't even feel like betrayal in the romantic sense. It felt like a test, like I was being measured, probed, watched for how much I'd take before I'd react. I didn't react, at least not out loud. Instead, I started pulling threads quietly. I checked our bank statements. Nothing dramatic, but small, regular withdrawals. always in cash, always just under the radar, just enough to be invisible if I hadn't been looking. Then her email. It wasn't easy. She had changed her password, but she'd used a version of our dog's name, a detail she forgot I remembered. And what I found inside confirmed what instinct had already screamed. This wasn't just carelessness. This was coordination. Her inbox wasn't just full of shopping receipts and newsletters. It was a roadmap, quiet, dangerous, and deliberate. Thread after thread between Maya and Neha. Some were short, others carefully structured. But one subject line stood out immediately. Make sure he says yes. I clicked it. The message was cold, transactional. There was no warmth, no hesitation. Neha had written, "He's not complicated. You just need to soften him. Be the sweet wife, make him feel guilty, push the 'we're a family' angle." Maya had replied with bullet points, tactics, timelines. There was even a line that made my chest tighten. If he resists, we slowly chip away. Remind him how stressed he's been. Say it's affecting your sleep. Frame it as his problem. They weren't asking for help. They were building a trap. They weren't hoping for my support. They were writing a script where I was the fool, slowly drained, then blamed. And what scared me most wasn't the money. It was that she knew how to fake love well enough to make me believe it. There's something haunting about knowing you're being played and pretending not to be. I didn't scream, I didn't confront, I didn't even cry. I simply observed. And then I acted. That night, after Maya fell asleep, I walked into the kitchen, opened the top cabinet above the stove where the spices were, and carefully installed a small, discreet camera. I chose that spot because that's where it always happened. That was her whispering zone. She had a habit, whenever Neha came over, they'd gravitate toward the kitchen, that corner, that stove, that low simmer of secrets between stirring sauces and flipping recipes. From there, the tone of their voices would dip, and their laughter would turn into code. I didn't want to spy, but I needed the truth to speak for itself. So I set the lens, synced it to my phone, and waited. Not for revenge, not even for justice, just clarity. The footage was only 5 minutes long, but that was all it took to shatter the illusion completely. It started with laughter, casual, carefree, almost innocent. Maya and Neha were standing by the stove pretending to discuss herbs or some recipe, but the camera caught more than movement. It caught tone, expression, intent. Neha leaned in and said, "You're not really going to poison him, right?" Maya laughed, her eyes flicking toward the hallway. Of course not. Just something mild, enough to make him feel off, dizzy, tired. Then we pushed the stress angle. She stirred a pot while saying it, like she was planning a casserole, not a breakdown. Once he starts feeling unwell, we blame work, say he needs rest. Then we talk to the lawyer. Power of attorney. Simple. Simple. They talked about dismantling me like it was a checklist, like I was a system to be rebooted, not a husband to be loved. And the worst part, Maya sounded calm. No hesitation, no guilt, just logistics, just timing. I watched the footage twice, once to understand the facts, and once to mourn the person I thought she was. I didn't confront her. I didn't slam the laptop shut or storm into the room demanding answers. I simply sat there in the dark, the glow of the screen reflecting off my face, as Naya's voice repeated over and over. Then we pushed the stress angle. Get power of attorney. Simple. I didn't rage, because this wasn't the kind of betrayal that calls for shouting. It was the kind that demands silence, focus, strategy. So I copied the footage, twice. One copy went to an encrypted backup drive. The second emailed to myself under a vague subject line buried among other files she'd never think to open. I didn't change my routine. I didn't act differently. I kissed her goodnight. I complimented her dinner. I let her believe she was still the puppeteer. But I had cut the strings, quietly. And now I waited, not for revenge, for the right moment. The table was set for 10. White linen, polished silverware, candles flickering in perfect symmetry. On the surface, it looked like any other family gathering. Smiles, small talk, too much wine, and too much pretending. Maya was radiant as always. Perfect hair, perfect hostess. Laughing in all the right places, asking all the polite questions. She moved through the room like she hadn't conspired to mentally break her husband just days before. Neha was there too, smiling wider than necessary. Her energy felt forced. High-pitched laughter, constant glances. Like she knew something the rest didn't. Or thought she did. And then it came. After the meal, as we all leaned back into our chairs with full stomachs and glazed-over conversation, Neha walked toward me with 2 cups in hand. She stopped beside me, smiled softly, and said, "This one's for you. It's made specially." Her voice was sweet. Too sweet. The room didn't go quiet, but time did. I took the cup, held it, smiled. And while she turned to speak to someone else, I reached over and made the switch. I waited until no one was watching. No cameras, no eyes. Just noise, laughter, forks against porcelain, the clinking of wine glasses. And then I made the move. Slow, simple, natural. I placed my cup down and gently slid it next to Maya's mother, Annika. Then, as if I were just helping clear the table, I replaced it with hers. Seamless, unnoticeable. She didn't see, Maya didn't see. No one did, and I waited. 1 hour passed. We had moved on to dessert. Anika took a sip from her cup. At first, nothing. Then, her face twitched. She coughed once, twice. A harsh scraping sound tore from her throat. Then, she couldn't breathe. Chairs scraped back. Panic exploded like glass breaking across the table. Maya's wine glass shattered on the floor. Her father stood yelling. Neha dropped her fork. People rushed to Anika's side. And I didn't move. I just sat there, calm. Because this wasn't revenge. This was exposure. The room had descended into chaos. Panicked voices, hurried footsteps, the screech of a chair being knocked over. Anika was being tended to, a cold towel pressed against her neck. Someone was calling for an ambulance. But I was calm, and it was time. I reached into my pocket, pulled out my phone, and tapped play. The room didn't go silent immediately, but the moment Maya's voice echoed through the speaker, it felt like every atom froze. Just something mild, enough to make him feel off. Then we pushed the stress angle. Power of attorney. Simple. The air shifted. Even the sound seemed to scrape through the walls like sandpaper. Then came Neha's voice, light laughing. He's not complicated. Just keep acting sweet. Every head turned. Maya stood frozen, lips slightly parted, as if the sound of her own voice had betrayed her more brutally than I ever could. Neha's face drained of color. She backed away, her hand covering her mouth like she could push the sound back in. No one said a word. Because what do you say when the mask drops, and underneath it is everything you feared? She stood there trembling. Maya, the woman I once believed would grow old with me. Her eyes were wide, glistening with tears that came too late. Her mouth opened, but no sound followed. No apology, no defense, just silence. And I let it hang. I looked at her not with hate, not with love, just with the kind of clarity that comes after everything inside you has gone still. Then I said it, calm, flat, final. You almost got it, Maya. $150,000. Almost. Her knees buckled slightly. Her face collapsed into a grimace, and then the tears finally came. But I didn't move. I didn't soften, not this time. Because it wasn't about money anymore. It was about intent. It was about how far she was willing to go and how far I was finally willing to walk away. She was still crying quiet now, hands shaking, mascara smudged, but I didn't offer comfort. Not because I wanted to be cruel, because I had finally chosen clarity over confusion. I reached into my pocket again, pulled out the phone, and spoke clearly, loud enough for everyone in the room to hear. I've sent the video to your father and to a lawyer. They'll know what to do next. The words landed like ice on hot glass. Cracks spread across faces, shock, shame, disbelief. But I didn't wait for a reaction. I wasn't there for that. I had no interest in apologies. I was done negotiating with people who thought love was something to weaponize. I didn't look back. I walked past the broken glass, the half-eaten dessert, the trembling hands, and the silence that now gripped every corner of that perfect little dinner. No one followed me. No one stopped me. Because even they knew this was no longer a scene I belonged to. Outside, the rain had started. Not loud, not dramatic, just soft, steady. The kind that doesn't scream, but seeps. I stepped into it, letting it soak into my shirt, my collar, my bones. I didn't start the car right away. I didn't need music or headlights or even a destination. I just needed space. A moment to be alone, not as a victim, but as a man finally waking up from a very beautiful lie. I didn't leave because I was angry. I left because I no longer believed she was real. Betrayal doesn't burn, it freezes. People expect betrayal to come with fire, with screaming, slamming doors, broken plates. But that's not what it felt like. It was cold, quiet. Like walking through a house you once called home and realizing nothing in it remembers you anymore. I didn't feel rage. I didn't even feel heartbreak. What I felt was emptiness. The kind that doesn't cry or shout, it just sits there, heavy and absolute, like frost on the inside of your bones. There was no music on the drive home, no destination, just the steady rhythm of tires on wet pavement and a silence that no longer begged to be filled. That's the thing about truth. Once it hits you, you don't collapse. You just stop pretending. The house was dark when I walked in. Not the kind of darkness that feels empty, but the kind that feels earned, like silence after a long war. I didn't turn on the lights, didn't need to. I knew every inch of this place, where the floor creaked, where the air held memory. I stepped into the kitchen, reached for the bottle of whiskey I'd been saving, not for celebration, but for clarity. I poured one glass. No ice, no rush, just stillness. I brought it to my lips, took a slow sip, and let it settle in my chest like truth finally allowed to breathe. Then I smiled. Not a grin, not a victory laugh, just a quiet, tired smile. Because this wasn't about winning. It was about proving to them, to her, to Neha, to everyone in that room, that I was never the fool they thought I was. That behind the calm, there was calculation. That the man they tried to dismantle was never that simple. Not all monsters raise their voices. Some smile sweetly, bring you coffee, and ask for things as if it's love, not leverage. This wasn't just about betrayal. It was about the lie underneath the performance and the man they underestimated. So here's what I've learned, and maybe what you need to hear too. Don't be fooled by quiet faces. Sometimes still water hides the strongest current. Not everyone who stays silent is weak. Some are just loading their final move. And above all, trust your instinct, because sometimes it's the only thing telling the truth. Sometimes the most dangerous threats don't come from strangers, but from those who smile at your dinner table. What this story teaches us is simple yet vital. Trust is not built on words. It's revealed in patterns. Learn to listen with your eyes, not just your ears. When something feels wrong, even if you can't explain it, pause, observe, protect your peace, and above all, never apologize for paying attention. Your silence doesn't mean weakness. Sometimes it means strategy. Because in a world full of noise, stillness is power. If this story moved you, made you think, or reminded you of a truth you've ignored too long, don't just scroll. Hit that subscribe button, turn on the bell, and join us at Through Her Eyes, where every story isn't just told, it's felt.